The post-classical period in world history is dated from about 500 CE to 1450 CE. This span is one of the periods that has been reshaped extensively by work in the field of world history. It was once viewed as a somewhat confusing stage in human experience. One reason for this confusion is that the geographical territory organized into civilizations in this period expanded greatly, as did the number of separate civilizations. A second explanation stems from the European history term for this period, the Middle Ages, or the medieval period, which somehow implies an awkward, stagnant stretch of experience in Eastern Europe, the grandeur of Greece and Rome, and the glories of the Renaissance. Now, from a world history perspective, the post-classical period was a time for great dynamism, with many major innovations and extremely vigorous societies. Medieval Europe would be only a small part of this larger experience. Now, in trying to define the post-classical period, we are using a key analytical tool of historians, periodization. The introduction of a new period in world history means that the framework that had described the human experience previously is no longer central. Now, in introducing a new period in history, we must address 3 points. First, we need to prove that the themes of the previous period are no longer dominant. Second, we need to say when the new period comes into play and when it stops being salient. And three, we need to articulate what the new themes are to which most major societies will have to react. The first point in this instant is easily established. With the fall of the great classical empires, we no longer see the process of expansion in China, India, and the Mediterranean, and the development of integration devices in these societies to hold their expanded territories together. Now, at the end of the classical period, China and India are essentially established. We certainly do not see continued expansion and integration in the classical Mediterranean world because that civilization was burst apart. The second part we must address in introducing a new period relates to chronological boundaries. The beginning of the post-classical period is marked by the fall of the Han China, Gupta India, and the Roman Empire. The period also is marked by the emergence of the Arabs and Islam as a new force in world history, beginning around 600. In this period, Arab Islamic civilization becomes the first world-class civilization that we have dealt with in world history thus far. Now, the end of the post-classical period is described primarily in terms of Arab political deterioration, but also changes in Arab culture and economic roles. This reduction would be followed by perhaps 2 centuries of experimentation, resulting in some intermediate systems that take us up to 1450. Now, the post-classical period saw the emergence of a large number of civilization centers and a larger geographical range for civilization that had been true in the classical period. The Mediterranean world split apart and 3 related but distinct civilizations emerged from the wreckage of the Roman experiment. The first of these developed in the Middle East and North Africa, which became the heartland of Islam and the Arab world. The second involved the territories carved by the Byzantine Empire in the northeast corner of the Mediterranean and the extensions of Byzantine influence into the other parts of Eastern Europe. And the third involved the society that we come to call Western European society. New territories entered the civilization game, including Japan, Russia, northwestern Europe, northern Germany, the British Isles, Scandinavia, additional parts of sub-Saharan Africa, and the Americas. Now, the splitting of the Mediterranean world and the geographical expansion of civilization brought with them new challenges in defining the number of civilizations in our study. Now, 2 themes served as primary focal points for the post-classical period. The first theme involves the spread of world religions, which showed the capacity to pour across political and cultural boundaries without necessarily erasing those boundaries. These world religions, Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam, would push so far into the civilized regions of Afro-Eurasia as to touch literally every major society. The post-classical period is partly defined by the immense surge of missionary religions, mainly originating in the Middle East or India, but spreading from these places to other parts of Asia, such as Africa and ultimately almost all of Europe. Now, this focus on cultural developments helps explain why the post-classical period is not defined by overarching political themes. Churches, networks of Islamic centers of law and scholarship, and Buddhist temples become the focus of activity in this period, eclipsing the role of formal states. The second theme involves the emergence of a world network. In this period, systematic exchanges begin to predominate much of the Afro-Eurasian world. During the post-classical period, a basic commercial artery emerges running from the Middle East across the Indian Ocean to India and Sri Lanka, reaching Southeast Asia, stretching into the Pacific, touching the Philippines, and extending to the Pacific coast of China. This east-west artery was embellished by an elaborate series of feeder routes that ran north to south, linking China, Africa, Scandinavia, and northwestern Europe in the Arab world. Now, these trading connections were sustained by new technologies, new navigational devices, and improved map making. One other mechanism useful for interpreting this period is a categorization of the New World and Old centers of civilization into one of three economic contact zones based on their relationships to new patterns of interregional trade. The first of these zones is focused on the Arab world, the Byzantine Empire, India, and China. In the language of today, this zone would be the developed world, the areas that built most clearly on the achievements of the classical civilizations. These areas had the most sophisticated manufacturing systems, the largest cities, the most sophisticated opulent upper class and artistic styles of life, and the most elaborate political structures. These areas traded actively with and influenced one another. Now, around these centers emerged a host of societies in which civilization was a relatively new form of human organizations, including Japan, parts of Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Russia, and Northwestern Europe. These societies forged trading connections with the more developed regions. Now, deliberate imitation enabled these second-tier societies to develop cultural and economic apparatuses more quickly than they would have otherwise. Now, a third significant region of civilized experience we'll discuss later also developed in this period, but had no effective contact with either of the first two zones. Now, the two major themes of this period raised some final points. The spread of world religions involved new kinds of contact, rivalry, and suspicions that would become durable parts of the world history environment. At the same time, many world historians would claim that the new trade connections and the resulting contacts and imitation possibilities deserved even greater emphasis. One world historian has said that around the year 1000 CE, the human experience reached a crucial divide. Before that time, the bulk of human experience was shaped by local and regional factors, with the focus more on separate factors instead of shared ones. After 1000 CE, the balance shifts with the focus on convergence rather than divergence. And from that point to the present, one sees a pattern of interaction, a thirst for contact, and a willingness to imitate that transcend the divisions and local identities that had been emphasized earlier. Now we can see the importance of new levels of contact, but the concomitant development of new religious loyalties sets up an obvious dilemma. Religions establish new cultural boundaries that could modify or challenge the new commercial connections. Now, in sum, one emerges from the post-classical world with a sense of new contact and interaction, but also with the potential for new rivalries. These divisions would shape the world of the post-classical centuries and the world after that as well.